All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Karina with United Latinas, and I sit on the board. And I'm so honored and grateful to be here today with Tatiana. Super excited about our conversation. And as everyone knows, we've been doing these lovely cafecitos on mental health awareness, but we've been taking perspectives and thinking about it and talking about it a little bit out of the box. So, not super traditional, which I love to do. And today we're going to explore the central nervous system and responses to everyday life challenges with Tatiana, which is so exciting and so interesting to me. But before we get into our conversation, I would love, Tatiana, if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, just give us a little bit of a background.
Absolutely. I'm so excited to be here. I'm excited for this conversation. So, I'm Tatiana. I am half Colombian, half Guatemalan, first generation, and I am a trauma therapist. I've been a therapist for 9 years. I'm a somatic experiencing practitioner and a holistic coach. And I specialize in helping women heal trauma and their nervous systems through a method called somatic experiencing, not to be confused with somatic tools, where we are working directly with the nervous system to change and rewire your physiology so that you can live a thriving life outside of survival mode.
Oh my gosh, I love everything you just said. But I want to take a couple of steps back for our listeners, people watching us today. And can we go through a little bit of like a dictionary? I would love to do that. Like, can we start with some of these terms that you mentioned and how we define them? Because I think you and I have talked a little bit before the different definitions of trauma or the nervous system or burnout or like how all these are related to life challenges. So do you mind starting with a little bit of a bunch of definitions of these terms so we're all on the same page of what we're talking about?
Absolutely. So let's start off with the nervous system. So when I talk about the nervous system, I'm actually talking about the autonomic nervous system. So we do have our central nervous system and we have our autonomic nervous system. So I focus on the autonomic nervous system. And the autonomic nervous system is responsible for all of your internal organs. It's responsible for your involuntary movements. So like when you sneeze, right? Or when you just have like an itch, that's your nervous system, your autonomic nervous system. And it's also responsible for sensations, emotions, and thoughts. And so when we think about all of our internal organs, let's just briefly go over our internal organs: our brain, our heart, our liver, our lungs, our kidneys, our stomach, our bladder, right? And so when we think about the autonomic nervous system, it's really controlling or responsible for a big part of your body. And so the nervous system, when it's presented with a threat, and this is a perceived or an actual threat. So, again, the nervous system doesn't use logic, it only speaks through physical sensation. So, if it perceives a danger or a threat, it's immediately going to go into what we call fight or flight. If the nervous system can't fight the threat or flee from the threat, the nervous system is going to immediately fall into freeze or shutdown. It's going to become immobilized. Okay, so now we're going to go into the definition of trauma. So, if the nervous system can't discharge or can't complete those survival responses, fight, flight, or freeze, that survival energy gets stored in the body. That survival energy is the trauma. So, trauma isn't what happened to us. Trauma is not an event. It's not what happens to us, but it's the response in the body, in the nervous system, as a result of your nervous system not completing those survival states: fight, flight, or freeze.
I love that. So, because traditionally people think of trauma as like a traumatic experience, right? Like, oh, I got into a car accident, or, I broke my leg, or, something like that. But I
Mhm.
think what people don't understand is there is those emotional traumas, right? Or psychological traumas addition to the physical traumas that we do lodge in our body. So there is a physical trauma that can be lodged in your body, right? Like if you broke your leg and having to have possible surgery or walking again, that's a physical trauma. But what you're referring to is a lot of the psychological trauma that gets lodged in your body, and people don't realize that that's an aspect, or that is a form of trauma.
Exactly. So I think about trauma as anything that's too much, too fast, too soon for your nervous system. And remember, we're talking about the capacity for the nervous system, not our minds, not our logical brains, right? And so we might say, oh no, that wasn't overwhelming for me. But that's your mind saying that. Was it overwhelming to your nervous system, right? And so that's what we think about when we have a dysregulated nervous system. We have a traumatized nervous system. So if you are someone who's constantly in a state of fight or flight or freeze, survival mode, then you have a traumatized nervous system. And so when we think about a traumatized nervous system, we're thinking about a dysregulated nervous system. So that's what dysregulation means. It means that there's unresolved trauma in the body, in the nervous system. So when we think about a healthy nervous system, I love talking about trauma in the nervous system, but when we think about a healthy nervous system, a regulated nervous system, we are not talking about a calm nervous system. So regulating the nervous system doesn't mean calming the nervous system. It just means that the nervous system is flexible and it has flow. So a nervous system that is regulated can go into fight or flight, and then naturally it comes back down into a parasympathetic state where it feels calm, settled, socially engaged, at ease. A dysregulated nervous system is a nervous system that goes into fight or flight. It gets stuck there for hours, days, weeks, months, or even years. And then instead of coming back down into a parasympathetic state where you feel calm and at ease, it actually falls into freeze or shutdown. And so it goes fight or flight, freeze, fight or flight, freeze. And there's no flow, there's no flexibility. It can't naturally pendulate.
So, let's talk about like some real life examples, or how do we even know that we were in that mode, right? Or that our nervous system, is in that fight or flight, or in flux, or in trauma. Are there moments in our lives that we don't even know that we're in that state?
Absolutely, especially if you've been living in survival mode your entire life, right? It's probably going to seem normal for you. And it becomes so normal that sometimes we start to think that these traits are part of our personality because you've been living in survival mode for so long. So oftentimes I might hear someone say, oh, I'm just an anxious person, or I'm just type A. And actually, type A people are good indicators that you've been in a state of fight or flight, sympathetic activation for a really long time, maybe even your entire life. So when we think about, let's start with the fight state.
Yeah.
When we think about the fight state, we're thinking about someone who gets frustrated really easily, angered really easily, becomes defensive regularly or easily, might be considered or labeled stubborn, right? Someone who is resistant to trying new things, someone who is very reactive. When we think about road rage, all of that falls under the fight state. When we think about the flight state, we're thinking about anxiety, racing thoughts, over worrying, over intellectualizing. Someone who lives in their heads is someone who is in the flight state. Avoidance, restlessness or racing heartbeat, feeling like you're always buzzing, right? That's all part of the flight state. And then the freeze state is, we think about depression, low self-esteem, low self-confidence, feeling stuck, feeling like, okay, I know all of the things that I'm quote unquote supposed to be doing, and yet I can't get myself to do it. I feel stuck, right? That is the freeze state. Burnout lives in the freeze state. Dissociation or disconnected from yourself or from others or from reality, that all lives in the freeze state.
I love those definitions you gave. Like they're super clear because I think what happens to a lot of us is that we don't ever stop to actually have this conversation or think about it. And I love that you said, oh, I'm just an anxious person, or I'm a type A person, or I could never do that, or that doesn't fit my personality, right? Like, how often do you hear that where people are like, oh, that's just not me?
Yes.
No, I can't do that. And it's like, is it though? Is it really just not you? Or do you have to build a sense of awareness? So that's like, how do people even start, Tatiana? Like on a simple level. I mean, obviously they could come work with you, which we will get to. But if it's just, I think that there is, and you can disagree or agree with me, but I think there's such a big mind body disconnect, right, in most of us. And so we sort of get stuck in that story that you mentioned of this is who I am, or I'm just this. So how do people begin in simple practical ways to just start to change that story or start to build awareness in of themselves as to really what are their real tendencies and not just the story we tell ourselves?
Absolutely. So the nervous system's primary language is physical sensation. The nervous system doesn't use logic at all, right? So we as humans have a logical, a cognitive part of our brain, right? And we use logic often, right? But the nervous system doesn't use logic. So, in order to heal the nervous system, in order to support the nervous system, we need to connect with physical sensation. And the only way we can access physical sensation is by connecting to our bodies, right? And so it's really simple. It's simple, not easy, but simple as in we can just bring our awareness into our body and check in. How's my heart rate? How's my breath? How does it feel to sit on this chair right now? How does it feel to have this conversation? Me and you, right? Me and Karina are talking. And as I'm talking to Karina, I'm sensing into my body, right? How does this feel? Is my mouth dry or is my mouth watery? Do I have saliva in my mouth, right? Because dry mouth indicates survival mode, fight or flight, right? So more saliva in the mouth means, oh, I'm in a parasympathetic state. And so just checking in, what is my body doing and what am I feeling? And if we can begin to check in with our bodies every single day, 30 seconds a day, it doesn't even have to be long. What's happening in my body? Then we can learn how to support our bodies more appropriately, because when we're in fight or flight, we're going to support our bodies a lot differently than when we're in freeze, right? And so when we're in fight or flight, we want to do things to bring ourselves down, right? Down regulate, right? But when we're in freeze, we want to mobilize. We want to bring up the energy a little bit. And so we're going to do different things. One of my favorite practices that anyone can do every single day, and it's going to work both ways. It's going to downregulate and upregulate. I don't know if that's the correct term, but like if you're in freeze, it's going to bring you up and help you feel more alert and alive, is called the VOO sound. So VOO, VOO sound. And what you do is just inhale, and then you let out a VOO all the way until your breath is out. So keep going until you can't breathe anymore. And that is going to stimulate the vagus nerve. And if you haven't heard of the vagus nerve is the primary nerve of the parasympathetic nervous system, which is part of, again, our nervous system that helps us feel calm and safe and at ease, right? And so anytime we stimulate this nerve, we're going to feel more calm, at ease, settled, and connected to our bodies.
I love that. I love a simple, practical tool.
Yeah.
That is so amazing because
Yeah.
I think also as human beings, our tendency is to set these big, lofty goals for ourselves, right? Like, oh, okay, now I brought awareness. Now I realize I do this. So from now on, I'm going to do an hour every day of this or that. And then we go right back into that mode because we feel like a failure because we haven't reached that goal. But it was such a big goal. So thank you for bringing up a simple, straightforward, practical practice that can
Mm-hmm.
make a huge impact in a short amount of time
Yeah.
and help us learn that sense of awareness and that sense of the mind body connection, which is so important, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I know you and I discussed also in terms of these connections, how it can impact self-esteem and how it can impact burnout and anxiety. Can you talk a little bit about that and maybe a couple of other simple tools that people can sort of get from this conversation?
Absolutely. So what happens is when we spend too much time in a state of fight or flight, naturally what's going to happen is your nervous system is going to shut down. We're going to fall into a state of freeze and shutdown, burnout, right? Essentially, if we don't go from a state of fight or flight into a parasympathetic state. So if we spend too much time in go, go, go mode, hustle mode, right? Can't slow down, work, 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 naturally we're going to burn out, right? And once we're in this state of freeze and shutdown, once we feel like I don't have the energy, chronic fatigue, exhaustion, I can't get myself to do anything, we really can't do much. So, what we need is really rest, gentleness, and gentle mobilization. So, when we think about burnout, when we think about chronic fatigue, exhaustion, freeze state, we're immobilized. So, we need to slowly and gently mobilize. That means we're not going to the gym 7 days a week when we're in burnout mode. That's not going to help your nervous system. We need gentleness. So that means we might roll out our shoulders and wiggle the fingers and roll out our wrists. And we're doing gentle, slow mobilization. We're doing self contact, hand on the heart, hand on the belly, right? We are feeling this pressure, this connection with the body. And only when the nervous system feels safe will it naturally move out of freeze and shutdown, aka burnout,
Burnout.
and all of the other things that we mentioned that live under freeze and shutdown. So, the first thing is really, whether you're in fight or flight or freeze, is really the connection to the body, right? It's bringing that awareness back into the body. That's always step one, right? So the VU sounds, and like I said, self contact, right? I like to do this thing called self locating, where you're just locating basically each part of your body and you're just feeling your chest, your arms, your belly, your legs, just kind of moving through. And we're just self locating. How does this feel to make contact with every part of my body, right? When we do this, when we make contact in a very slow and intentional way, the nervous system, if you're in a freeze or shutdown state, the nervous system is going to wake up a little bit. So your senses are going to wake up and you're going to feel naturally more alert and awake. So when we move out of freeze and shutdown, naturally the nervous system goes into a sympathetic state. It's the natural cycle of the nervous system. And so now we're in fight or flight. We might feel a little bit more alert, anxiety. And now we want to say, where do I feel the anxiety in my body? Is it in my chest? Is my heart racing? Can I just gently bring a hand to my heart and feel that heartbeat and sense in and what happens as I give it time and space, right? The nervous system heals in slowness, and so we need lots of time and space. And if we give this enough time, does my heartbeat slow down? Does my anxiety naturally dissipate? And that's not the goal. The goal is just to support the nervous system, right? And create more safety and resiliency in the body and the nervous system. But naturally, you'll notice there's some kind of shift. And maybe it's not, we have a level 10 anxiety, and then we go to a 1 where we feel completely calm, right? Maybe it's not that, because that's not realistic, but maybe it's, I have a level 10 of anxiety, and maybe I went from a 10 to a 6. Wow, that's a shift, right? And then from a 6 to maybe a 4. And that takes time, but we need to first start with the body, connect with the body.
Right. I love all of that. I think it's so powerful. My thing that I love to say to people is, do you ever realize you're sitting at your desk and you feel like you're completely short of breath, but you haven't run anywhere, you haven't walked, you haven't moved, Tatiana, you're still at your desk, but you feel like you're short of breath.
Yeah.
People, that's because you've been holding your breath the majority of the day like this on your computer and not realizing that this is all tense, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the minute you can, that's why I love also you said roll the shoulders. Like the minute you go and you do your VU sound, I teach it as elongate the exhale, but it's essentially the same thing. It's like you're literally physically getting it out of your body and releasing it. It can really change your nervous, like just the simplicity of it, right? And so I love that. I love the simple, but sometimes hard to do. But the more we work on the awareness of what it is we're feeling and how we're feeling it. And I think the other thing that's really important to mention is triggers, right? Like I think, how do you recommend people notice the triggers or see the triggers?
Yeah. So a trigger is really your nervous system feeling unsafe. That's all that a trigger is. There's something that happens that your nervous system says, wait a minute, this reminds me of something from the past, right? And it happens unconsciously. And so there's no safety in the nervous system. Logically, you might be in a safe place, but internally, your nervous system says, there's something that doesn't make me feel good. So the key here is, how can I create more safety in my body, right? And so again, the first thing is always connecting to the body, right? But also we need to find both internal resources and external resources. So internal resources are just the supports that already exist in your body. And so, for example, right now, my internal resource is how my seat feels, right? My legs feel really supported right now by the chair, right? And so there's a lot of groundedness and warmth here. And so that's my internal resource. Now, an external resource is something that gives you a sense of safety from the outside. So orienting is a really great resource. When you orient and you allow yourself to look around your space and really take in the objects, the colors, and allow the neck and the head to follow your gaze, we're doing a few things. We're showing the nervous system through the eyes that there's no actual danger, and the nervous system starts to settle. And by moving the head and the neck with the eyes, we're showing the nervous system that we're not stuck, that we can move, right? Immobilization, mobilization, right? Oh, yeah. And we're not doing this consciously. It all happens unconsciously. Right? It happens so quickly. And so we're sending those cues of safety. Orienting is probably aside from the VU sound, it's probably the primary way that my clients tend to support their nervous systems, because it's so easy and you can do it everywhere. and at any time. And it's so quick because, again, you're not telling your nervous system, I'm safe, I'm safe, I'm safe, there's nothing going on. You're showing the nervous system. We need to show the nervous system, not tell the nervous system that we're safe.
Oh my gosh, I love that so much, because I always say to people, there's such a big disconnect between our mind and our body, and we've got to bring them together. But the signaling has to come from our physical body to our mind. And I think our natural tendency of a lot of human beings is for the signaling to come from the mind and then tell the body.
Yeah.
So I love what you just said of, you know, orienting and understanding what's around me. Another thing that I love to tell people is to just ground down on their feet, to just take a stance and just literally feel the heaviness of their legs and their feet on the floor, on the earth, and like close your eyes and just breathe. Like it's gonna literally physically ground you to the floor.
Yes, exactly.
And then that again, but I love your term of orienting, because that is a form of like, I'm standing in this room and I'm okay.
Yeah.
And I usually recommend people to do that when they have to do a presentation or give a big speech or have a difficult conversation, because again, we're back to the nervous system, right? And when you know you have to confront something or deal with something, our nervous system goes through all those things. And so I love your example of orienting or grounding, so that your nervous system can be ready to deal with whatever it is that you have in front of you.
Exactly, exactly. And by practicing, I always like to invite people to practice these tools even when they don't need them, right?
Yes,
Because
exactly.
then your nervous system knows. It's kind of like muscle memory. We're building that muscle memory, and we're helping the nervous system use those tools so that when we really, really need them, when we're at a level 10, we can actually use them a little bit more easily. They're more accessible to us, versus if we're not training the nervous system, we're not checking in with our bodies at any point, and all of a sudden we're at a 10, and then we try to use a coping tool, it's not going to work, because you haven't trained your nervous system to use those tools.
I love that. I love that so much. It's like preventative medicine.
Yeah.
Start to practice Tatiana's recommendations today, so that in 10 minutes, no, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
You're having, a moment, you have these tools, right? Yeah. I am so sad that our time is almost up, because I could talk to you for hours, because this is so fun for me.
I love it too.
So Tatiana, because we have a couple more minutes, can you tell people where they can find you, how to find you, if they have questions, if they want to continue a conversation with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you want to learn more about me and my offers, you can visit my website at Tatiana Szulc. It's my first name and my last name, lmhc.com. And you can see all of my services and my offers there. If you want to learn more about the nervous system and trauma healing, you can come hang out with me on my podcast. I have a podcast called She is Resilient, and that's where I talk about all things trauma healing, holistic healing, and nervous system healing. So that is the best place to learn all about this. We dive into this a lot deeper.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Definitely everyone tune into her podcast, because I've had conversations with Tatiana and full of knowledge and amazing knowledge. So thank you so much for taking the time to do this with me today. I really, really appreciate it. And for those of you interested in United Latinas, please join us. Please become a member, participate with us. We want to get to know you. We want to learn about you. And yes, we will post Tatiana's website on LinkedIn. We will send that out to all of you. But get more information on United Latinas and come join us. And again, Tatiana, thank you so, so much for everything today. I love the conversation. And thank you all for listening to us. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Yay!
We did it.
We did it. That was so
Wait.
much fun.
I have to end stream, I